we spoke about how atheism was a challenge, but now atheism is dead. Since in some sense it is dead, or at least it's at the verge of dying. This new challenge that comes in with new spirituality and this new belief, do you think this can be more dangerous than atheism? Yes or no?
I think it's going to be more dangerous.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back to Incisive Thoughts. And today we have something really intriguing for you guys. So today's guest is going to be Imran Hussein, who's actually an independent researcher at the Sapiens Institute. He is rapidly becoming one of the most thought-provoking voices in contemporary Islamic thought. Imran dives into the deepest questions of our time, from atheism's decline to the rise of New Age and UFO religiosity, with insightful critiques of materialism, hidden metaphysics, and the godless spiritual hunger filling its void. He challenges us to rethink dawah in this post-atheistic age. Imran has some very important insights when it comes to dawah, and I think the discussion that we are going to have today is going to be categorized as atheism is dying. What's replacing it might be even more dangerous. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, bro. How are you?
Welcome to Incisive Thoughts. And so the first very important question that I have for you, which is very interesting, is you mentioned something like atheism is dying. Why do you say that? Or atheism is dead? What do we find any evidence for atheism dying?
Yeah, I mean, it's evident on many levels, bro. So what I would say, for example, some of these sort of social evidence for this, you see people that would previously be followers of people like Richard Dawkins, Sam Harris, Dan Dennett, the horsemen, basically, the horsemen of atheism. They are losing their popularity. People aren't really interested in them or their content. You see Sam Harris, who's made a shift. He was probably the only one out of the horsemen that realized this dry type of reductionist materialism is on its way out. So he made a bit of an intellectual shift. So he went from his type of, productionism and his atheism to, or his naturalism, towards a sort of pseudo-spiritual atheism, one that incorporated some Buddhist practices and meditations and spirituality. And he made this sort of concoction, and which he then wrote about in his subsequent books, Waking Up and others. So you saw he realized this and he's made that shift. But then also you see some, you can say indirect evidence from the popularity of people like Jordan Peterson. Jordan Peterson became extremely famous and popular, and it seems like a lot of people that followed the Dawkins and the Krauses and the Dennetts previously, now they started to follow people like Peterson. Although Peterson's fame and popularity seems to be on a decline as well. And, there's reasons behind that. But I think what's important is to just see the trend. A lot of people that associated previously with that type of reductionist, dry materialism are now moving towards a more of an open, fluid type of atheism, where they want to incorporate spirituality into the mix and other practices and views and ideas. So we're seeing that now. We're seeing that shift in society, and we're seeing that also through the rise of certain or the rise in interest in certain topics, New Age ideologies, religions, subcultures online, and all of this type of stuff. So yeah, I think they definitely, new atheism specifically, which was this movement, of the Four Horsemen were heading it, and this whole sort of intellectual, you can say, I don't even know if you can call it intellectual, but this whole movement, which was really pushed and promoted on social media, online, a lot of money was pushed into it. It had its public figures, its profits. That movement is on the decline. Those people are moving away from that, and naturally so, bro. I mean, human beings by their very nature are not just rational. We are spiritual, we are emotional, and there's different facets to our reality. And there's only so much or so long you can adhere to a very dry type of outlook or worldview, and eventually you have to move on from that. So we're seeing that shift now, bro. I think we're moving past that type of. We have moved past that, and I think, but saying that, we're moving more towards new challenges and new views and ideologies that are out there, which are in some regards or some ways probably more challenging to deal with because they're not as structured or as clear as, you know, that type of classical new atheism, if you can call it that.
Oh, that's very interesting. So you are saying that a particular type of atheism, which is reductive materialism or eliminative materialism and those kind of things, scientism, this is, we see we actually see a shift happening from that to something else. So what are these new forms of atheism that are emerging?
Yeah, and again, bro, so it's becoming very fluid now. And the problem with fluid ideologies is that they're very hard to pin down. Even if you look at it more from a broader perspective, you know, we went from the sort of pre-modern to the modern to the postmodern, and some academics would say the meta-modern age now. So we've gone through these transitions. And it's when you get to the postmodern, you start to see the difficulty in trying to define that and what it actually means. You know, whereas modernity was very well defined, very clear. You know, we knew what that stood for. But with postmodernism, it's very difficult because of that fluidity in its very nature. So and therefore, if you look at all of these new ideologies that are emerging, you see that they face the same problems, the same issues. They are very fluid, very dynamic, and therefore very hard to pin down. So we're seeing different versions of that. So on a sort of social popular level, you see when you speak to people, say when you're giving dawah and you're out there, you see people saying things like, you know, I don't believe in God. I'm an atheist, but I believe in spirituality. You know, I believe in some form of higher power, higher beings. I believe that the universe is sentient and conscious, and the universe, you know, is directing my life and shaping my life. All of these weird and strange ideas that are dominating society today, bro. So you're seeing all of the, and then obviously you see it within the UFO subculture online, which we've been speaking about a lot with IREP as well. The same sort of trend, D.W. Pasulka, for example, she, I think, highlights some very important points that what we're seeing, or a very novel way of looking at this movement, is we are seeing the emergence of a new religion because they have their prophets, they have their sacred places, they have their rituals, they have their beliefs. And all of these things, you see that this is an emergence of a new religion for the new age, basically. But then again, this has been repeated in the past. In the 60s and 70s, you had the hippie movements, and they had this belief in their space brothers and alien beings that would come and save them, and so on and so forth. And it's the point here is it's very fluid, bro. Like every other person you speak to will have their own opinion and view in regards to what their beliefs are. I don't see any one specific ideology which is solidified right now, but there's loads of different ideas circulating right now and views and beliefs that people have. And it seems to be very individual as well, which again goes in line with that sort of individualism that's been pushed by, you know, the current worldview. So yeah, it's very fluid, bro. There's a lot there, man.
That's very, very interesting. I mean, I like, you know, this gives me like so many different roads that we can take in this conversation. But I just want to start with one thing which has been slightly part of my research, which is cognitive science. So what you say is very interesting. It very much correlates with cognitive science. Since I've had Justin Barrett is one of the leading cognitive scientists, specifically in the field of cognitive science of religion. He put forward some cases with some studies that in any society where when God is replaced, it's not that they will be completely materialistic. Rather, it would be more like they have a negative correlation with the more you don't believe in God, you'll start believing more in ghosts and the spirits and karma and all of these kind of things. So that is exactly what we see here, that people are actually not holding that kind of atheistic Richard Dawkins kind of a worldview, but rather other things which still might be something related to the supernatural, or something that is not tangible, something beyond the materialistic scope, but yet not God. And what you are saying, again, another thing which is also very interesting, is this rise of individualism, which I think is also been slightly part of my research, where like some sociologists were talking about why religion altogether declined. Like I was going through this one specifically. If anyone can see on the screen, it is
Okay.
by Christian Smith, and the name of the book is Why Religion Went Obsolete. And I think the number one reason he uh, pointed out is the rise in individualism. And so he was mentioning, he gave many different reasons why religion, or like, people started moving away from religion. And like, the number one was individualism. Second, I had this figure who's very popular. I think he's also into cognitive science, John Wernicke. He said the same thing, that uh, so he had a very interesting take when someone asked him about, like, how atheism became common. He mentioned something along the line, I'm paraphrasing, where he said that it's not because the atheistic arguments were strong, but rather because there was, like, these family bonds are breaking and individualism is rising. This is what leads to people becoming more atheistic, or like moving away from religion altogether. So now the question that I have for you is like the kind of similarity I see with atheism and this kind of new age spirituality kind of stuff is that they both still are individualistic in nature. So people may have moved like from religion to atheism, and now atheism to new age spirituality, but still the kind of individualism is prevalent. So do you think this is the main cause?
Me personally, no. I see where the authors are coming from, and I agree with them. On a meta level, there's definitely those are factors which resulted or upheld atheism. And it's interesting because if you look at atheism philosophically or as a worldview or a belief system, it's very weak foundationally, right? There's no way of justifying any of the tenets, really. If anything, it strips you from being able to account for the most fundamental aspects of human reality and our existence and our existential reality and so on. However, it maintained, itself for as long as it did, and in some forms continues to do so for other reasons. And they're absolutely, I agree with all of this, that, this individuality, which is promoted by liberalism, this atomism and all of this plays a big role. But I think if the roots are further down, deeper down, when it comes to these, the emergence of new atheism. And this is something I'm actually writing about in the current book that I'm working on. It's not got a title yet, but the first part of the book deals with the history of our modern secular worldview, this current dominant worldview, and how it came to be. And if you look at, I trace it all the way back to the Enlightenment fundamentally, because the period of the Enlightenment was a very interesting period in history. This was the first time where the tables were actually turned. And when I say the tables were turned, what I mean is where the West as a whole moved away from the focus on spirituality, the divine, transcendence, God, towards a worldly objective and focus, right? We see Leo Damrosch, for example, he has a course on this. It's available online on the Enlightenment. And one of the things he beautifully illustrates is that the Enlightenment was the period where the focus was shifted from the vertical plane towards the horizontal plane. So meaning human beings going from focusing on the divine, God, spirituality, that after what happens after death, the meaning of life, working towards the hereafter, towards the here and now, the physical, the material, the world, and so on. So, and there was many thinkers and philosophers, and this was a whole movement that stretched over, over a century, more than a century. Some would say over close to 2 centuries, where people essentially turned away from the Christian dominated worldview in the West towards this new sort of secular way of looking at the world, right? Now, these Enlightenment thinkers weren't, you wouldn't call them atheists in the modern sense as we understand an atheist. Many of these thinkers and philosophers, they believed in a higher power, they believed in God, but they didn't hold on to Christianity. And there's reasons why they were frustrated with Christianity, because Christianity dominated the West for many centuries, and therefore Christianity also controlled every aspect of society. And we know that the persecution of free thinkers, knowledge was restricted, many other aspects of life and the intellectual life were restricted. And these people were basically fed up. And I'm just summarizing all of this. So the Enlightenment was this, the tables turned. And it's almost, like they say, throwing the baby out with the bathwater. That's the type of thing that happened. They were fed up with Christianity. They turned away from this sort of traditional Christian way of looking at reality and formalized and instilled a new way of understanding the world. This is why, man essentially replaced God at this period. Human beings became the center of reality. The human would determine, what is right, what is wrong, how society should be run and governed. This is why we saw the advent of liberalism and all of these other ideologies, political and otherwise. Essentially, what was being pushed was that the human being is the ultimate creature, the ultimate being. And the human being now decides every aspect of existence, decides what life is all about, decides what the direction or the purpose of life should be, decides who we are, decides, how government and society should be conducted and run, and all aspects of life. So they turned away from the church basically towards this new way. And at the same time, also, there was this revival of the classical works, which originally took place, you can say, or the origins of which began at the Renaissance, but this was where it all culminated. And by the way, the West got hold of classical knowledge, obviously through the Muslims and them preserving the works of the Greeks and the classics. But anyway, the point being, so this was where that shift took place. And it was an exciting time because there was a lot of, movement and a lot of development, and this bright future was presented to the world, that now we've moved away from these constraints and this old-fashioned backward way of looking at reality, and now we're going to progress. And progress was made, bro, no doubt. Because people turned away from the divine, another shift that also took place around the same time and the subsequent decades was an epistemological shift. So people went, again, from focusing on revelation maybe and the divine and being the sort of fundamental sources of epistemology to reason, rationality, and empiricism fundamentally as being the most dominant sources of epistemology. And that was instilled within society. So let's think about this now. The picture is emerging. Man has replaced God. That's the surrogate, right? Man now is in charge and determines and creates reality, essentially, all aspects of reality. The fundamental epistemology becomes rationality and empiricism, right? And yes, there was amazing progress made in technology and science and so on and so forth. Naturally, it's going to happen when you focus on these aspects. But at the same time, other things were overlooked, right? And Nietzsche is a very interesting figure because Nietzsche, when you study Nietzsche, you feel sorry for him as well for other reasons, which we'll discuss later. But I think he's very, he had his finger on the pulse. Now, for example, in the gay science, there's a parable of the madman, right? It's one of his writings, his books, the gay science. And there's a parable in there of the madman where this crazy guy comes to the society and he comes, with a lantern and, he's like, you essentially saying to people, you killed God, And the atheists run with this and they're like, look, Nietzsche proclaimed God is dead, but they don't understand the context of what's going on in this parable. Essentially, what the madman is highlighting, he's freaking out in front of people, and people are thinking he's crazy and mad. When, in fact, when you read the parable, you realize he's not the one that's mad. People are the one that are mad, they're responding to. But essentially what he's saying is, you've killed God. Where are you going now? How are you going to conduct yourself? It's like, and he gives amazing analogies of the earth being unshackled from the sun, which way's up, which way's down. Basically, you lose your bearings, is what the madman is saying. You've turned away from God, you've killed God. Now you're not going to know what to do. You're not going to be able to conduct yourself or function or understand the world, etc. And the people are looking at him in a funny way because they're like, well, what's he talking about? Because they're so excited with this new invigorated, way of looking at reality. This new start, basically, where that they're not being able to see the consequences of turning away from God. And that's what Nietzsche was trying to highlight, the consequences, the dire consequences. And they're not small things. We could probably touch upon some of these things, but there are huge things, huge problems that you face. And it's very interesting because in the Quran, we find a very beautiful ayah of the Quran where Allah says, and do not be like those who forgot Allah. Therefore, Allah made them forget themselves. And they are the ones that are the true transgressors. It's a very powerful verse. And I always say to people, if you want to see a real life tafsir of this ayah, taking place in the world around us, the open book of Allah, the world of science, look at this transition. When the West turned away from God, it set the stage for confusion and delusions and just destruction. So anyway, I know I've elongated this out I've deviated, but just coming back to the point is that we saw that the foundations of atheism, you can see how they were laid down, that the work was done. You know, empiricism and rationality was set as the fundamental epistemology. Man becomes the center of focus, not God. So obviously, over the subsequent decades, some others pushed this further. The positivists and logical positivists pushed the empiricism further. And then obviously at one point we got to the stage of new atheism, you know, where they really went all the way through and said, well, there is no God, there is no creator. You know, you exist, you're going to die and that's it. So you create your own reality. The existentialist philosophers also, you know, were trying to tackle these issues that Nietzsche was highlighting of the death of God, you know, and that's why they became very popular as well, which is because they were providing answers and solutions, or trying to at least, because the existential crisis that emerges from turning away from God cannot be solved, bro. It cannot be solved. And when I say existential crisis, I'm talking about who are we? Where have we come from? Why are we here? Where are we going? What are we? These questions have no answers in the absence of God. Zero. Absolute zero. Right. And this naturally, it doesn't work because the human being seeks out these answers. We are concerned about these questions. These are fundamental to our existence. Now, if you are living within an ideology or a worldview which removes all possibilities of you finding answers, you're going to be in trouble. Right. And people were in trouble. And that's why these existentialist philosophers became very popular, because they were trying to provide solutions and answers. And if you look at what they focused on, what did they focus on, bro? Nietzsche, Jean-Paul Sartre, Camus, all of them. The meaning of life, how to live, all of these types of existential things, right? This is why, by the way, I think Jordan Peterson became very popular as well, because if you look at Jordan Peterson's work after you study the existentialists, you see all Jordan Peterson has been doing is repackaging existentialism with a little bit of a spin of Christianity and some new age stuff, basically.
Wow. That was brilliant. I mean, that was amazing. Like, you go skimming through all of, like, you know, the history of atheism and how we get here. It's interesting when you say that. There's just one point that came to my mind, maybe to augment what you said. I had a discussion with Dr. Carl Sharif Al-Tobki, and he's also someone who like, you know, talks a lot about how modernity emerged and stuff like that. And he gave me an example, not an example, but an analogy of how reality used to be multidimensional, where when this era came in, it collapsed it all into just one, the Shahada realm, the kind of the empirical realm. All of the others were overlooked. So maybe, like, you know, there was advancement, like, you know, we expanded on the Shahada realm a lot, in the sense that we had a lot of advancement in science and stuff like that. And we were so, like, you know, we thought that, oh yeah, this is where we're seeing progress. So this is all of reality. But just because we had progress in this realm does not mean that we collapse all reality to this unidimensional world.
Absolutely. So, yeah. And I think this is a it's absolutely,
yeah.
Can you hear me now? Yeah, sorry. This is a beautiful point, bro, because this is true. You know, like it's a beautiful example of reality was multidimensional. You know, and it's profound because it was multidimensional from an experiential perspective, the way we saw the world, you know, the way we understood it, that there was the metaphysical and the physical, and there was a lot more going on to reality than what meets the eye. And then it linked to that epistemologically as well. People didn't just see empiricism or rationality as means to understanding the world. Intuition, right? And many other personal experience was a big thing for people. There was so many different aspects of understanding the world, but what we see through the Enlightenment and after was, it's almost like blinkers on a horse. We really limited and narrowed our perspective of the world, and this conditioned the mind, you know. And we know, if you look at neuroscience and so on, the way the mind works is very fascinating, bro. It works on a set of beliefs. Whatever those fundamental beliefs are, the mind is fixated. It's fixated on that. I mean, many times, I'm sure you've experienced this as well. You know, when you're going down the street and you look in the distance and you think you see a cat on the road, right? And you look again, it's not a cat. It's like a cardboard box, which is just standing upright.
Yeah.
Right? So our minds literally would create reality in some respects, what we see and what we perceive. A funny thing happened the other day. I went to the shop, bro, and I went to get coffee, right? And I hadn't been in the shop for maybe a few weeks, and that changed the shelves around. So I normally went towards the aisle where the coffee normally is, right? And I went there and I looked up once as I was walking towards it. I saw the coffee on the shelves. And when I got to the aisle, there was no coffee there. And then I realized, I asked someone, and the coffee had been moved to the other side. But why did I see coffee there? It's because my mind was expecting something based on prior beliefs, right? And this is why, bro, your worldview is essential in understanding reality and comprehending reality for what it really is, right? It's so important, a worldview, right? And this is the people that were pulling the strings. They realized this and they understood that human psychology and how it works and how a worldview is very important. And that's why they constructed a worldview which put blinkers on your consciousness, if you like. And that's why people just can't see things. This is what Allah says in the Quran, that the universe is full of signs, ayat, but people don't see it. Why don't they see it? It's not because the signs aren't there. It's because of the limited worldview, right? Allah says, for example, in Al Imran, there's a very powerful verse 190 and 191, where Allah says, indeed, in the creation of the heavens and the earth and the alternation of night and day are signs for people of lub, right, of understanding. And then in the next verse, Allah tells us who these people are. Very interestingly, Allah says they are who remember Allah sitting, standing, and lying down. And they ponder deeply upon the creation of the heavens and the earth. Two things Allah mentions about these people that see the signs. They remember Allah and they reflect. So here Allah is showing us that this particular worldview, which incorporates remembering Allah and reflecting deeply, doing the science, etc., results in one seeing the signs. And this explains also why, bro, people like Richard Dawkins, Neil deGrasse Tyson, and others who spend their entire life studying the universe, they don't see the signs, bro. Yeah, it's not that the signs aren't there, it's just their worldviews are limited. So it prevents them from seeing what's actually there. So this is why it's very important for Muslims to really ask yourselves, what is your worldview? Is it constructed in the right way? Everyone has a worldview. You can't escape it. It's impossible to escape. Everyone has a set of fundamental beliefs which results in the way you perceive and understand reality.
That's something definitely I agree with. And it's very interesting you say that. Like my discussion with Dr. Karl Sharif Togi, it's titled "Why Islam is Holistic and Modernity is Myopic," and the thumbnail is more like Islamic worldview versus the modern worldview. So I had a brilliant discussion. I definitely, after that conversation itself, there was a shift within me. And anyone who's interested in that topic, definitely I would recommend to watch that video regarding worldviews. Another thing that I want to bring in, which is very interesting, I would say, has been a part of my research, is actually researching on these kind of materialistic new atheists and, what they had to put forward. And what's interesting is that, I've done, I used to, now I think it's irrelevant, but I used to see what kind of a role model does Richard Dawkins himself depicts, and can he actually himself be a good example to lead in terms of materialist. And there's something really shocking. Many people, they don't know, bro, like Richard Dawkins, even though he's like the role model that people expect that they want to follow him, he in a conversation with Brian Greene, they were having a discussion, and Brian Greene is an agnostic, and he's a physicist, well-known physicist. He talks about how sometimes whenever he is in a situation where, he feels he's in trouble, he prays to God for help, which we know, in the Quran that happens. So surprisingly, he was asking Richard Dawkins, do you have any such thing? And he's like, there is one confession I'd like to make. I have this issue of not being able to sleep in haunted houses, or those houses
Richard Dawkins said this.
Yeah,
Richard Dawkins said this.
He said. Yeah, he said that. He said, I cannot actually have a problem, spending the night in a haunted house, like a house that is known to be haunted. I was like, okay, so he is the primary example for materialist, but he cannot even sleep in a haunted house. So what kind of a role model is he actually giving to this materialistic world? And it's interesting where some psychologists have made comments on Richard Dawkins. There's one psychologist, his name is Bruce Hood. He himself is a hardcore materialist, I think. But what he talks about is, at least his take is not as I would say, hardcore as Richard Dawkins. He looks at Richard Dawkins and he says that, look at what he does. When Richard Dawkins talks about Darwin, and when he talks about the whole theory of evolution and stuff like that, Bruce Wood talks about some video of Richard Dawkins where Richard Dawkins was given something which Darwin held. And Richard Dawkins, I don't know what that thing was, I forgot. And he was like, oh, so Darwin touched this thing, and he's trying to feel that, I'm trying to feel of Darwin or something like that. And then And like Bruce Wood is saying that look at this guy. He does not understand that he is having some idea of the supernatural. He's trying to connect with, like, there's some, like, if Darwin had held something and, he's trying to see there's something there special in that, that
Mhm.
is in some sense beyond the materialistic realm. He indicates other studies which he has conducted or someone else has conducted, which showed that the many hardcore atheists or scientists were given two things. One was they were given a pen, and they were told that this pen was held by Einstein, and people had something like, when they looked at the pen, they felt that there's something special in that pen. And then they gave them a cloak, and they told them that this is one of the cloak of a biggest serial killer. And when they were wearing that cloak, they did feel that, oh, there's something wrong. I don't want to have that negativity within me. So irrespective, of what psychologists derive from that. But one interesting thing is that, that there is some aspect within us, even though if it's accurate or not, if it's in a sense, it, it's true or not. But the fact is that these human tendencies cannot be negated altogether. And the whole materialistic worldview could not actually incorporate this area of a human nature, basically, which,
Absolutely.
see, I have many other examples, but I don't want to, go on a completely different tangent.
No, this is
But
brilliant, bro.
like, so why did I bring this topic up is, I want to partly ask you is that, so is this the reason why, if the materialistic worldview, these Michael Shermer, Richard Dawkins, Christopher Hitchens and Daniel Dennett, all of those were trying to put forward in front of the world, they themselves were not very good examples. After all, I give you a few examples. Is this the reason why people moved away from them and tried to look for something else? And maybe
I
because of that, it's
Yes,
still.
that's a good point. I don't think that's the primary reason, bro, because most of these guys, although they feel this way, they don't make it public, right? They won't come out. Dawkins wouldn't normally come out and talk about this stuff. I'm surprised you found this stuff on Subhanallah. But at the same time, bro, it's again very similar historically as well. If you look at some of the founding fathers of the Enlightenment, the philosophers, the thinkers, even of modern, later on, the guys that laid the foundations of the modern secular worldview, many of these guys were engaged in occult practices behind closed doors. This is a known fact. There's a very interesting book called something Disenchanted. I'll find it and I'll send you the link to it. They were practicing all sorts of strange stuff and trying to engage with all sorts of, spiritual beings behind closed doors. But in the public, they were pushing the materialism and naturalism. So the fact that Richard Dawkins has done something, I'm not surprised because it's human nature, bro. Human beings, look, however you interpret what's going on, whether you give it a secular psychological interpretation or whether you give it a religious interpretation, that's besides the point. What's evident is that something is going on. Every single human being, no matter how atheist they are, they incline or they desire some form of spiritual experience, some sort of supernatural, some sort of exotic or phenomenal experience. You can't deny this, bro. It's a part of our DNA. It's a part of our being. Justin O'Barrett, who you mentioned, who you had on your show, has also mentioned this, that children naturally develop the belief in higher causal agencies. Oliver Petrovich is another child psychologist who's made similar claims. Atheism is an acquired position. It's something that has to be taught. I'll give you an interesting story, bro. I remember back in the day when I used to go Speaker's Corner, one day this atheist lady, she brought her daughter, who was like maybe 9 years old, 8, 9 years old. And she got her to stand on the stool, to give a talk about atheism. And halfway through the talk, she could tell she wasn't sure about, she wasn't agreeing with what she was saying. And she kept looking back at her mum, should I say this? Is this right? And then when she was asked questions by some people, where did all of this come from? You could see on her face, she knew the answer, but she kept looking at her mum because her mum was enforcing and instilling this ideology or this worldview into her mind. This belief that there is no God, there is no creator, it's all matter in motion, is a very dry, unfulfilling, existentially empty way of looking at reality, bro. It's flawed on every single level. And it doesn't satisfy anyone, bro. That's why we're seeing people move away from these ideologies and these ways of life, Sam Harris, man, he's a good example. He incorporated some sort of, although it be a new age type of pseudo spirituality, he blended it in. because he knew there was a need for it and he wanted to stay relevant, you know. So it's not surprising, bro. And I'm sure that definitely could be one of the points or reasons that some of these guys have come out and made such claims themselves. But yeah, it's very interesting.
Wow, that's very interesting, and that gives me so many ideas, like so many topics to talk about. And this is why I always feel like when I'm talking to a guest who has very interesting insights, and no matter how much time we have, it feels like the time is very less. So also just one thing that I want to bring up, maybe because you might find this interesting, is because area of cognitive science of religion is basically my area of research, which I have been pursuing for more than a few, like a few years. And what's interesting is that you would find like there's so much of research that talks about, for example, this research that was conducted by Era Naranzian, and they talk about how disbelief or non-belief in God is actually not a belief in itself, but a suppression. It is actually a form of suppression where you actually have that belief, but you have to suppress that. There are other cognitive scientists that especially talk about how that is so cognitively effortful. That is not something that you can do at ease. Many cognitive scientists talk about how this seems to be very effortful cognitively, and you have to consciously always push down those ideas to live, and that is not something that is livable easily. Like there is one of the father of cognitive science of religion. His name, like some people might call him the father. His name is Robert McCauley. He had this book called Why Religion is Natural and Science is Not. In this, he gives a full graph of how we have like the human being is not a blank state where you can have any belief. There are some beliefs that are very easy to hold and you naturally drive towards them, and there are others who for those beliefs you have to put a lot of effort and practice them. So he segregates the sections into maturational naturalness and practice naturalness. And then he puts religion, surprisingly, and religious ideas as maturely natural, where it is the plain free is tilted towards religious belief and practices, whereas atheism, you have to he has something like playing chess, for example. It's not something that everyone can do. You have to put a lot of effort to learn how to play chess. The same way he put atheism somewhere nearby playing chess, because that is, or scientism also, because that is something that you have to force on yourself. So that is just one research. There's another one by Deborah Kellyman. She talks about something known as promiscuous teleology, where when we look at aspects of nature, we see them with teleology, with purpose. Not just children, but even adults. She conducted a study on these kind of PhD evolutionary biology, people who believe in evolution, and these kind of PhDs, which would completely say that, how did this come about or how did that come about? They can just give you like a scientific explanation. So the experiment involved asking them questions, but rapidly, so they don't get time to consciously think, but just give an answer as soon as whatever comes to their mind. And what's surprising was that these people who were looking at things very naturalistically, they themselves, without even consciously realizing, started ascribing teleology to nature. So that is something that cannot be negated. At the same time, I mean, there's a lot that I can talk about. Just one more example I'll bring up, which is Jesse Bering, who himself is an atheist. He talks about how atheists have a problem of denying an afterlife, denying that there is meaning and purpose to the world. He himself says that atheism is only skin deep, where deep down the person would still have something like meaning and purpose and would ascribe meaning and purpose. And he's done many experiments to their lives or to reality. And then they would also have an idea of an afterlife subconsciously, even if they consciously try to deny it. So that's very interesting, where atheism is so cognitively effortful to the point where a person cannot even fully maintain it. There are many other things within them that they don't even realize.
Oh, just think about it this way. What you mentioned is profound. So, first problem, to adhere to this worldview or this ideology of atheism, it takes immense effort, right? In every aspect of life, you have to stop, you have to focus, you have to force yourself to believe, you have to enforce constantly. That's one. It takes a lot of effort. Two, when you do make the effort and you do hold on to it in some way, shape, or form, it removes you from being able to explain the fundamental existential questions that we have as human beings, which leads to angst and depression and sadness, such as who am I, where have I come from, what is the purpose of life, ultimate purpose of life. So it doesn't give you the answers, right? 3, it just leaves you feeling empty, bro. Because I mean, where are you gonna? What's left? You removed all teleology and meaning. And think about how depressing of a way of looking at the world that is, bro. You know, you're constantly telling yourself nothing. How are you gonna deal with suffering, bro? Right? Evil and suffering, trials and tribulations. Imagine someone that's forced themselves after years of cognitive practice to adhere to an atheist worldview, has no answers as far as their existence or existential questions, important questions, can't objectively ground morality, has a crisis or a tragedy in their life, and they can't give any meaning to it because ultimately everything is meaningless. It's just an accident, including themselves and their lives and everything that happens in their life. What a depressing way of looking at reality. No wonder people are moving away. People aren't stupid, bro. Honestly, I'm sorry, but anyone that has any self-respect and dignity for their existence would realize that such a worldview should be just thrown into the garbage bin. Honestly, it's sad that people put themselves, even if you look at it purely from an empirical, reductionist, evolutionary perspective, and Sabur mentions this point, there is advantage in having a belief in God. Whether you believe it's just a psychological construct there to help you survive and reproduce, fine. But there's advantage in that, right? If you can have a worldview which gives you teleology or telos, and you can see meaning behind things, and that helps you live your life better and survive better and to reproduce and to move through life in a more productive way, then that's beneficial, even from an evolutionary perspective. Why would you then go through the effort of denying? And this is why, bro, it fundamentally boils down to this. Atheism, the denial of God, is not a rational position. I'm sorry, it's an emotional issue. It's an emotional problem which has been cloaked and veiled by this intellectual, rational lingo. That's all it is, bro. It's been covered and cloaked with this rational. It's a fundamental emotional issue. It's an emotion of the issue of the ego and an issue of emotions, bro. That's fundamentally what it is.
Subhanallah, that was really profound. And I mean, we can talk like, for an hour on this topic, and I find this very interesting. But since we are short for time, I'll just give one reference to the audience who are interested in this whole studies of cognitive science. Like, I have a whole series on this topic. Anyone who's interested, like, they can see the link on the screen and maybe go through, I think it was 7-part series on Fitnah and cognitive science. And I've tried to link it with the Fitnah and show how cognitive science kind of reveals these insights, which Islam would already predict in some sense, and understanding human nature from a Fitra perspective. Anyway, so that's all said and done. Like, we have got some very good insights about why atheism cannot be fully, in a sense, grounded rationally as well. And at the same time, like, it's not livable to some extent. And the interesting thing that you said is that even though, okay, so this is what was going on in the masses, you also mentioned something where some people may put forward an idea of atheism which the masses accept, but then we have found some evidence deep down where some people may not actually believe in a reductive worldview. As many of the enlightenment thinkers and even thinkers during the Renaissance were actually putting forward this view, which now, like, which became very common, but they themselves were deep down not accepting this view. Do you have anything to say about that? Because I think that's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely, bro. Like I said, many of these guys were engaging in occult practices and trying to contact different beings, to benefit from them and to attain knowledge from them, and so on and so forth. This is it's again, there's several books on this. I'll send you the link to the one I read recently, which I found very fascinating. I went through some of, at least, haven't finished. But it's telling, bro, isn't it? It's in line with what we've been discussing so far, which is that this reductive, naturalistic, atheistic way of looking at the world, this worldview, is unfulfilling. You cannot substantiate it. It's just there to serve a purpose, bro. Essentially, that's what it's there to do. And I think Alistair McGrath, in his book, The Twilight of Atheism, he summarizes it in a beautiful way. He says that atheism and modernity are two sides of the same coin, right? It's a very profound way of thinking about it because, and there's truth to it. Atheism it serves a purpose. It has utility. It's utilitarian, bro. It's in line with that objective of worldly progress that was pushed during the Enlightenment. This was the philosophy to create a worldly utopia, right? That was the promise. That was the idea. That was the drive. Now, they had to instill all ideologies possible which would get human beings to focus on this objective. I mean, to believe in a hereafter, to believe in God, to believe that the eternal life is to come and it's not in this world and that this world is a testing ground is not conducive to that objective, bro. It's evidently not conducive because the human being then doesn't focus on the material. If he has money, alhamdulillah. If he doesn't have it, doesn't matter, alhamdulillah. That's not the focus. The focus isn't the material world for that type of mindset, that type of psychology, that type of worldview. So you had to instill within society and the minds of human beings ideologies which would align people with that objective of a world to create a worldly utopia. They needed hamsters to run on the wheels, basically, you know, the hamster wheel to keep spinning it. They needed people to build, you know, to develop, to grow. So you had to create idea, and atheism and other isms and schisms, similar ones, are perfect fits, bro. That's why Alistair McGrath's comment, two sides of the same coin, makes sense. You know, they have the same objective. Because what does atheism again teach? There is no God, there is no creator, YOLO, you only live once. Enjoy yourself, have fun, make as much as you can in this world. That's in line with capitalism. That's in line with other, you know, isms and schisms. This is why even Karl Marx, for example, you know, he said that the religion is the opium of the masses or something along those lines, right? Why? I mean, if you look at the reasons behind this statement, is profound. Because he realized people that were religious were not going to be the movers and shakers behind promoting his ideology or in instilling his ideology. Because the religious mindset was what? If you have it, you're grateful. If you don't have it, you find a way of coping with not having, right? So that was not good enough because you needed people that wanted and they would do anything to get what they wanted from a worldly perspective. Hence, religion is the opium of the masses. It drugs, you know, people according to their perspective because their objective is worldly progress. It drugs people from that perspective because the world is not the objective anymore. So you can see how atheism and other godless ideologies have utility, bro, from this perspective, right? Not because they're true, inherently true or rationally true or logically true, but only because they have utility. But like we're saying now, we're at that stage now, I think, in history where people just don't care. You know, they realize to an extent that they don't want to be, you know, used by the system. They don't want to be, just programmed by people to believe whatever they want, the powers that may be what they want them to believe. So they are moving away from this. But the problem is, because they have inherited certain psychological traits, such as, you know, this type of God complex where you create your own reality, you know, you are in charge of your destiny. And all of these ideas, when you get the human being to believe such ideas and experience such things, like, you know, you have to create your own destiny. You choose what you become. You choose what you do. You choose your identity. You choose. I mean, psychologically, bro, that when you taste that, it's very hard to go from that standpoint to submitting to another being, a higher power, you know, to being submissive.
Yeah, I just have one thing to add, maybe if you allow me. So,
Yeah, go ahead, bro.
yeah, so if you can see on the screen, this was actually someone had sent me this, and this was very interesting. How this was by Dr. Mohammed Talal. He showed how all of these modern ideologies are interlinked in this web, where you find liberalism. I can't zoom in, unfortunately. I don't know how to zoom in. Can we? So you see, capitalism is linked with liquid fluidity in the sense, and that is linked with liberalism. Liberalism is linked with materialism. They are all linked with post-modernity and, you know, progressivism and nihilism and stuff like that. They all come under one system, which is also linked with capitalism, media, and stuff like that. So I just wanted to know your view on this, like in terms of when it takes time to actually go through the entire thing, and maybe there are some things that, you know, maybe beyond me as well. But then what I see is that Darwinism and social Darwinism, for example, globalization, all of this is empiricism also. You can see determinism is and individualism, less family, all of it is connected. So in the sense, people might have a problem with one or two, but you see they all come in like a full package in terms of the
Yep.
modernity package. So if all of this is put forward, like if one person like starts believing in one or two, then it all links him back to the whole where he has to accept the full package of it. What are your views on this?
Yeah, bro, this is brilliant. This is phenomenal. This is exactly what we're saying here. They all are linked. They all have shared utility. They feed off each other to meet the same fundamental objective, right? And ultimately, there's a few handful of individuals pulling the strings that are benefiting from this whole system. That's it at the end of the day, right? And that's the system. And people are waking up from this. They realize this. And it's, I mean, you can see the links. Some of them are very evident. Like, okay, empiricism, why push empiricism or the scientific method? Well, it serves two purposes. One, it helps us focus on technology and developing technology, etc. And secondly, it helps continue to disconnect the human being from the divine, because science relies on methodological naturalism, and you condition the people and the person doing the science and the people that read the science to see the world in a certain light or a certain way, which is a very materialistic way, which is, it's all atoms and molecules in motion. It's all linked, bro. Atheism, no God, no creator. So again, nothing to focus on there, guys. Everything to focus on the here and now, what's in front of you, this world. Right? So modernity, we're going to focus on creating the worldly utopia. And that's why postmodernism was very interesting. One of the defining features is that it's a rejection of modernity. It rejects modernity and it exposes its promises of creating this worldly utopia and all of this stuff. Because some of this stuff didn't happen, bro. Like World War I, World War II, all of these and other wars and so on and so forth that have taken place in the past couple of decades and centuries have been an outcome of modernity, essentially. And where, people have gone to the nth extreme of wanting to attain the world and attain power. So, I mean, it's failed. And postmodernists, rightly so, have called this stuff out. But at the same time, they've also, like in cricket, when the bowler, fast bowler, pace bowler, a good pace bowler always follows through after he's delivered the ball. The ball leaves his hand. Postmodernists, the way I see it, postmodernists are fully following through with the ideological beliefs that were instilled by modernity, right? So, for example, there is no God, there is no creator. Okay, there is no God, no creator. There is no objective morality. There's no absolute truth. Everything is fluid. Everything is whatever you want to make it. Truth is as you define it. There is no identity. Identity is whatever you want to make it. There is no objective morality. Morality, right and wrong, or whatever you deem right, as long as you don't harm the other person. So it's just you can see how all of this links together, bro. And metamodernism obviously now is that stage where they're trying to a type of reconciliation between modernity and postmodernism, which I don't see working either, bro, because fundamentally all of these ideologies, all of these isms and schisms have one thing at least in common, at least one thing, which is the denial of God. There is no creator. There is no revelation. Go through the lists. Feminism, naturalism.
In the sense,
look at any of them. Any of them, bro. Feminism, materialism, naturalism, transhumanism, transgenderism, any ism or schism. Yeah, any ism or schism, bro.
Wow.
Sorry, go on.
Brilliant. Yeah, no, I was saying what you're talking about. Yeah, I can see clear links in this chart. For example, you mentioned empiricism also. It's linked to utilitarianism, feminism. It's linked to globalization and many other things. I mean, I can clearly see the link here. And this is why I bring this up because they are all linked in this kind of way. We don't think about it in that sense. So maybe this can be a little helpful. Now the next question that I have is, since we know that there is one shift that has happened, which is at least people are moving away from the whole empiricism and materialism, do you think this system still allows for people to believe in higher beings and we would call them jinns, we might call it something else and stuff like that, and they can believe in all this kind of things, but still not believe in God?
Yes, yeah, and I think that's the natural progression, bro. Considering the psychology of people, that they have tasted being or playing God, that's what modernity in a nutshell pushed or promoted, or was the outcome of it, because they've tasted playing God, meaning they create their own reality, their own destiny, their own definitions and ideas and views, and that plus the system itself, I think the natural progression is not that people will jump from this to believing in God and traditional religion and submit themselves to the creator of the heavens and the earth. I don't think that's going to happen because of their psychology. But what we're seeing is the natural progression, that they're tearing out of this bubble, that we've seen, that web or that bubble, and the natural things that would come, that they can run towards and climb towards, are the views that we're seeing. I believe in higher power. I believe that the universe has power, because take, for example, someone that says that they believe that the universe is sentient, or the universe is the creator itself, the physical. So what do you see in that belief? Well, they're maintaining that type of materialism, which is that it's the universe, nothing beyond that, nothing supernatural. But at the same time, they're getting, or trying to get, a type of spiritual fix, or satisfaction. The belief in aliens or higher beings, you can see that as a natural progression, right? Because why? Because it's still to some degree within the materialist framework. Why do I say this? Because aliens exist, apparently. When you talk about aliens, they are beings that exist on other planets within this universe, right? That's the traditional understanding from an extraterrestrial perspective, beings from other planets within this universe. So it's still more palatable and digestible to that sort of materialist mindset. But at the same time, it gives them something a little bit more, that we're not alone in the universe, that there are other beings. Some people push it further, as you know, bro. We discuss this stuff in our private groups all the time. Some will go as far as, these beings seeded us, they created us, they tweaked the DNA in previous hominoids or whatever was there, right? So they will go a step further. Again, still staying within that materialist framework to a degree, but at the same time opening it up, right? Making it a bit more exciting for them, a bit more intriguing. Some would go even further, and that these beings may not be extraterrestrials, they may be interdimensional, which, by the way, is what the evidence seems to be pointing towards. And they are entertaining that. So I think this specific topic that we've been focusing on at IREP, and you're, mashallah, part of the team as well, is a very interesting topic considering the times that we're in, because what it does is that it puts a small tear in the fabric of materialism, and because it's such a vast topic and there's so many interpretations of it, that it opens up that possibility. And we know many people have been having experiences, it goes beyond the extraterrestrial stuff. People have had weird experiences with beings and entities, and these are people who are formerly atheist, right? Me and Farouk have spoken to people who are formerly atheist. They started to have certain experiences with these beings in their homes, etc. And then after that, they changed their worldview. And they had to, naturally, because they started to see things which they previously believed didn't exist under their worldview. So it's very interesting. And there's a beautiful dawah potential in this topic as well. But I think it's a natural progression. Yeah.
Yes. So one thing, that comes to my mind, I forgot, this is very, very interesting. Now that we come to this topic, me and Brother Farouk, in our last discussion, which I have not yet released, Brother Farouk gave the example of Michael P. Masters, who was an anthropology, biological anthropologist, and he himself, had phenomenological experiences, which was like an ontological shock. And we were talking about how many of these people are having these kind of ontological shock. It's an ontological shock for them because they've been in this kind of box of materialism, and then they have an interaction or encounter or something like that with other beings and stuff like that. And they get really shocked, to the point where Mike P. Masters was mentioning something like he went into depression or something like that, or he was shocked for it. Took him a lot of time. He went through trauma because imagine a person who's believing that there's nothing beyond atoms and molecules and all of those things, and then he gets an encounter like this. I mean, he cannot, if he's smart enough, he won't deny everything to just hallucinations and stuff like that. If he's actually experienced it, he wouldn't go too far to deny his own experience, which means that he has to, in a sense, see that his materialistic perspective was wrong. So what I found was interesting is that people still are holding on to their materialistic or this kind of atheistic view so much, to the point where I can use the example of Mike P. Masters, who did have experience with other beings, but then within his ontology, he cannot make sense of how, because because he has to adhere to something like evolution. He has no other framework to make sense of other supernatural beings or beings that are beyond the material realm. he came up with the theory of actually that these are human beings just coming from the future. And then
Yeah.
and then I was like, why would you say that? And then on one podcast he was talking about how he came up with this whole theory of, even if like there are like aliens with like aliens with these big eyes and stuff like that, he's like, oh, that is evolutionary possible, like in future maybe this grows within the human being and they'll start looking like this. I'm like, that's crazy, man. That's just where you are just trying to hold on to your evolutionary view of reality, and now you're finding no means, so you're just like trying to say that anything is possible. I mean, I would suggest, bro, even if you would have seen a person like with two horns, like imagine, okay, this is a thought experiment. You would say, oh yeah, that's evolutionary possible. Like evolutionary, maybe in future we grow two horns on our head. That can happen. Like give a million years or like 1,000 years. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and this is an interesting point, bro, because it highlights a very profound psychological point as well. Is that, again, going back to how a worldview shapes the way you perceive and understand reality. Michael B. My master's,
Yeah.
his example is very interesting because he, I think, was previously an atheist or didn't believe, and he even said in one of the podcasts, I don't know if Farouk mentioned this, he said that his life was very sort of dry, is empty, wanted something more, right? And then he has this experience. He has this interesting experience, and like you said, ontological shock. Yes, what's shocked is his worldview, right? What he deemed possible based on his interpretation of reality. A worldview is basically like a prism, bro. It's like a set of lenses. Is in a prism, you get light that comes in white line and it refracts into the different colors and it comes out the other side. That's how worldview functions. Information comes in from the external world and it's processed through your worldview. And there's an output from it. But he had the ontological shock. Now, there's two things that could have happened. One, it could have shifted his worldview, which can happen. People's worldviews do change. Or you can try to justify what you've just experienced and explain it or interpret it in a way which fits into your worldview. He seems to have done the latter, right? Same with D.W. Pusulka. I believe she was more atheist inclined before, and then because of her experiences and interactions and discussions, she changed her perspective.
That's brilliant. And just one thing I want to bring up is whatever Michael P. Masters saw. I mean, that could be jinn, that could not be jinn, whatever that is. I mean, we're not commenting on that. Maybe that can be true, a true experience, a false experience. What we are talking about more is the kind of interpretation that he gives to that experience. And that is something that, I want to just clarify before all people might think that, oh, we are making something that, what he saw was true or false, because we are not in the position to actually, completely affirm or deny his experience altogether. But what's interesting is that many people are having these kind of experiences. And another discussion with me and brother Farouk we were having, I was going through this whole psionic summit that happened, and there are many kind of credible scientists, leading researchers who talk about different kind of experiences that they've had. So there's, of course, an area that we need to pursue, and inshallah, maybe in future, maybe we can tackle this topic in itself, which I think is a very profound and interesting topic. But one thing I want to talk about is that, there was one question that had come up to me, like I had to train an individual and I had to speak about New Age spirituality and atheism. So before actually speaking to them, I was trying to do some research between this kind of New Age spirituality and atheism. What is the common links between them? Okay, well, there's a lot of difference that can be fleshed out, but what is common? And what I found is very interesting is that, first of all, individual is common, a very common link, because both of them, this kind of encourage an individualistic worldview, or actually are a manifestation of an individualistic perspective. At the same time, they both are allowing you to accept a worldview which does not have any kind of accountability. In a sense, from a religious perspective, like, we would have some kind of accountability on our lives, and all our actions have some outcomes. But when you look at New Age spirituality, it does not have like an afterlife where you are accountable for what you do in this life. Rather, it's more centric to this life itself. And then what I found was more interesting is that both are against organized religion, irrespective if you believe in a kind of New Age spirituality and spiritual beings and stuff like that. They have, most of them we would find, not all of them, that they have something there which is against organized religion altogether. And Atheism also has the same thing. They have something against organized religion. They are individualistic. They allow for the human being to have a worldview where you're not accountable. You can be liberal. You can enjoy life however you want. Believe in spiritual beings or believe in only atoms and molecules. But this is, I think, so. So when we are doing dawah, I think maybe I want to know your thoughts in terms of do you see this trend in terms of actually them being against organized religion? And now if the ideological battle has shifted to a completely new area, here we need to put forward a case for why organized religion or why accountability matters and why it is the objective fact. What do you think about that?
Yeah, absolutely, bro. So those are absolutely the common trends. The individuality, they're still wanting to be in control of your destiny, you being the center, as opposed to the divine that you submit to. So those are definitely the same. Those are the problems that, or the similarities which remain between sort of the atheism and New Age stuff. And that I think needs to be definitely tackled. And that's why also, going back to just for a second to the UFO topic, you see that there is a rejection and a dislike of discussing religious matters or bringing religion to the discussion. Most people don't want to hear it. They don't want to talk about it. So there is that issue definitely, and that is the challenge, bro. How do we tackle that? Essentially, what we're talking about tackling is the mindset. That psychology of the people, which is, no, you are not God. The universe doesn't revolve around you, but you are a creation of a higher being, the creator of the heavens and the earth, that created you for a purpose. So you don't determine your own purpose. You don't determine what you are, who you are, why you exist, etc. You don't, determine what right and wrong is. God is the one that determines these things. And that is a bitter pill to swallow, bro. Let's face it, for many people. They just don't want to submit. They don't want to give up on their desires. And by the way, desires is another big thing that we haven't mentioned. People wanting to fulfill their desires and do whatever they want to do. That's a huge thing, bro. Because with desires, the thing is, it brings immediate gratification and satisfaction and joy, to the person. Now, human beings are emotional by their very nature, more than even intellectual or rational. They don't want to give up these things, man. They don't want to give up these practices. I have to submit to a higher being and give up this stuff. But then again, we see, there's some promise, I guess, some positives out of this whole UFO topic. For example, D.W. Pasulka and Jesse Michaels, the guy that interviewed her, they were talking about the phenomenon and how they're trying to contact the phenomenon. And they were talking about, how they're planning on, or maybe gave up or planning on giving up or becoming vegetarian, because apparently it helps with that connection and all that stuff. So we see that people are willing to submit. This is a type of submission, giving up something to make contact with a higher being. There is that potential. But I think it's fitri as well to give yourself up, to submit to the creator of the heavens and the earth. But it's that battle between your nature and nurture in this regard. Your nature of wanting to submit to a higher being, and that nurture, that psychological nurturing that, no, you are that higher being. You determine everything. You choose what's right and wrong. You fulfill your desires and have fun and do whatever you want to do. That's the battle. And I think people can get over that. It's just a case of showing them the issues with coming up with your own ideologies and your own views and religion. Because essentially, what are you doing when you're making up these religions and these ideologies and these new spirituality? You're basically lying to yourself. Philosophically, logically, you're lying to yourself. You're making stuff up, right? So, and what does that mean? That means whatever you're making up is not true and therefore has no intrinsic value. So then why do it anyway in the first place, right? Oh, it brings me joy. So we bring me joy and happiness and contentment. Okay, so you'd lie to yourself to bring yourself joy and happiness and contentment. What does that tell you? You are simply submitting to your lower self, your base desires. Your desire to be happy and find joy and fulfillment. Aren't you more than that as a human being? Are you more than that as a human? Or are you happy reducing yourself down to the level of an animal that functions based on just desire and input output? So I think these are profound questions to ask these people. And again, it's appealing to and pulling at the strings of human dignity and the fitra and the self, that soul that exists within every single human being. Everyone has a soul, whether you deny it or not, right? So it's about speaking to the deeper self, inshallah, I think.
So what you mentioned is very interesting when it comes to the idea of the soul. You said that we cannot deny the soul there is a lot of academic literature that is growing in terms of ideas like consciousness and stuff like that, which now I think many people are accepting, and this kind of blunt materialistic view is something that people are moving away from. I think people are accepting things like idealism, panpsychism, and this new terms are coming in, which people are accepting. A thing was which is, and I think you might know him. He on my channel.
Sorry, say that again, bro. I lost you for a second. Can you say that part again? The last 30 seconds?
I was saying that what you mentioned about the soul is very interesting, where you said that now we cannot deny the soul. I think there is a lot of academic literature that is going on where people are moving away from this whole blunt materialistic view and at least accepting that there is more to reality than just atoms and molecules. I think some may directly accept the soul, some may accept something like dualism, but then there are others who might still not believe in materialism but move into something like new terms like panpsychism and idealism, and all these kind of new isms start to emerge. And then within panpsychism, they have many different types. So I think this creates a way for people to move beyond materialism and yet still accept some kind of a godless view. One thing that's interesting is that I had one scholar, you might know him on my channel. His name is Joshua Rasmussen. He's kind of at the cutting edge of philosophy of mind and also on theism. He had a very radical take on materialism. He said that positing something like, material reality, creating consciousness or conscious beings is worse than a contradiction. That's what he said. And I was like, well, how can you say it's worse than a contradiction? And then he said that with a contradiction, you just violate one principle. But when it comes to you saying the material reality creates something like consciousness, it creates more than 5 problems altogether. So he says it's worse than a contradiction. So I found that was interesting, that within the academic sphere altogether, now this new view is emerging about accepting mind being more fundamental than matter. That's very interesting. What is your take on that?
Yeah, absolutely, bro. I think it's a fascinating topic because, and I think he's right. It's almost, I would go further and say it's almost paradoxical, bro, because look, this entire endeavor of suggesting that materialism, productive materialism is the correct view, and then going from that and suggesting, like Daniel Dennett, that consciousness is just a byproduct of the function of the brain, the physical brain. It's just an illusion. And then when you sit there and you realize that everything, all of this that I've just mentioned, productive materialism, justifying it, using it, coming up with these ideas of consciousness being an illusion, it all stems from consciousness. At bottom, you have to be consciously experiencing the world. These things that we're talking about, materialism, reductive materialism, consciousness being an illusion, it's happening within consciousness itself, which is foundational, it's axiomatic. So it's almost paradoxical to say the very thing that you are relying upon and dependent upon to have these discussions, you're denying and you're saying is an illusion. Well, what does that say about your ideas and your theories? It's very paradoxical, bro. It's self-refuting in many ways. And you're right, there's new movements now, like analytical idealism, and all these other theories that are emerging now, which again, maybe in some ways going to the other extreme, that consciousness is at base, at bottom, and everything is emerging from consciousness, and all of these, our individual streams of consciousness are linked in together in this one ultimate consciousness, and this ultimate consciousness sent us here as individual consciousnesses to learn and experience, and all of this time. You see the opposite,
or like maybe some it sounds like theism, but when you actually analyze and see, they don't talk about theism. They don't talk about like a personal god. That's
no. And this is why Muslims need to be careful, bro. And this is a very important point. Muslims need to be. We get very excited when we see a scientific theory which aligns with our view, or we think aligns with our view to whatever degree. We get very excited.
Yeah.
And we should be very careful. Well, firstly, why are we getting so excited? Well, by us getting excited, it shows a bias that we have, which is that on some level we believe that science is the ultimate method to understanding the whole of reality, which is not the case. Science is a brilliant method, but it has a scope. It works within a certain framework. So be very careful. Just because someone is coming along now and saying that, oh, consciousness is real and it's foundational and materialism isn't real, there is no material reality as far as atoms and molecules are concerned. It's just a projection of the consciousness itself. It's what the consciousness creates, as something it observes. We need to be careful. Let's not be too quick in running towards, these new views. Remember, Islam.
That would be a kind of pantheism, right? Like if someone.
Of course, bro. Yeah. Exactly. It could be shirky if you adopt it as in its current form, right? You have to be very careful. So you don't want to be committing shirk by doing stuff. We don't need to jump. Islam gives us an understanding of reality, one which is sufficient for us. Our objective of life is concerned, it's sufficient for us. Yes, it's interesting, we can study these things, but don't always try to make a link immediately with a new current theory of science or something that's becoming popular. Because remember, all of these guys out there, their objective isn't to align their understanding or perception of reality with Islam. It's just their best effort or their best guess or their speculation or their understanding of the data or their way of connecting the dots. It doesn't mean it's absolutely true. Right?
In the kind of restricted view that they have.
Exactly. And it may be another view, like analytical idealism is coming from a different worldview. It's not coming from the reductive materialist worldview, but it's another worldview, which, yep.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah, one thing which is very interesting, which this analytical worldview, analytical idealism comes from Bernardo Kastrup, a guy, and he says that he is ultimately he's a reductionist, and he believes in reductionism as some kind of a faith. Like he starts off his conversation. I was watching his discussion with this guy Susan Blackmore, and there is a discussion with Philip Goff, and both of these Philip Goff is a well-known philosopher, and in both of his discussion he says that he's ultimately a hardcore reductionist. It's just that he understood that his reductionism is not working on materialism, so he shifted it into like an idealism. So he still has a Buddhist view where there is, go ahead.
And when he speaks, that's what comes across. He's very reductionist, but from his perspective, he shifted the reductionism out of materialism and just applied it to his consciousness, understanding of consciousness.
Exactly. So I have some very interesting things to talk about him, but I'm still wondering if it would be a right time, or maybe we can have a whole separate discussion about him and treating his worldview. What do you think?
Yeah, maybe we can save it, bro, because I think we should save it for when if it becomes more of an issue for Muslims and they start talking about it, and it's this.
Because there are some really so there are some really absurd things that not just him, but many people who are coming up with these new godless sort of worldviews that allow for supernatural and things like that. There are many issues related to them, and sometimes you find contradictions. Sometimes you find just like straight up denial of aspects of reality which you would never think that someone would deny. But one thing that is interesting, that I was reading this book, and maybe I can segue the discussion into this now. Unmasking the New Age. This is a very interesting book. It's a very old book actually by Douglas, and he's talking about the New Age spirituality at his time, and it had emerged, and he essentially talks about how within this people have forgotten, in some sense, or people have completely overlooked the idea of having a coherent worldview or looking at things from like a logical perspective, where you have to actually have coherence in his word on your worldview. You can't just pick and choose anything you want. It's not like a buffet of beliefs which you have. But then he's kind of making a case where those who now move from materialism, or however they come to this kind of new age spirituality, it's more like a buffet where you take any belief you want, and you don't see if they don't even go well together. And he gives a very brilliant example where he says that people now would start to believe in this kind of monistic kind of pantheism. But at the same time, they would also believe in reincarnation. At the same time, they would believe in karma, which many of the ideas they might pick from the East. And then they would believe that there's something divine within. And he shows that this is a clear contradiction. If you believe in all of reality is just one, a pantheistic reality, and then you also believe in the idea of the soul, you cannot make sense of that. Either if all of the reality is just just one reality, and there is you are just part of that reality. And then the idea of reincarnation of another you coming about, and on karma of your past life, where what you did or morally right or wrong is being applied to you. I mean, we don't have time to jump into all of that, but just trying to highlight through his example how it is not even possible to make sense of that. And I think this is just one example. There are so many examples within new age spirituality where you find that people are believing in different beliefs, but they actually don't go together. So do you have anything to say about that?
Yeah, 100%. Brilliant observation by him, man. Absolutely brilliant. Yeah, it's absolutely true as well. You see these contradictory beliefs and ideas where they have one view and another view, and they just go in contradiction with one another. And again, it outlines two things. One is that the New Age is all about you. Again, that you are God, you are playing God, you determine your reality, and you determine what you become and what you do. That is being moved into this new age as well. That sentiment, that psychology is not gone anywhere. It's just shifted over into the new age where now they are, you know, concocting their own religion or their own view. So they are taking what they like, bit from here, a bit from here, a bit from here, a bit from here, and mixing it all together, right? So it shows that they are the creators of their own religion, basically. Number one. Secondly, it also highlights that people aren't being very logical about the whole process either. It shows that it's a human effort which is bound to be flawed, as far as their development of a religion. And this is very interesting as well. You can juxtapose this with when the Quran says that you will not find any contradictions in the Quran itself, because it's from the divine source. Human beings are bound to err. We're bound to make mistakes and make errors, and that's evident in man-made religions. And you study the Quran, you study Islam, you don't find such contradictions. You find that everything cohesively works together, and it comprehensively makes sense of reality and life. So yeah, it's a brilliant observation, bro.
Yeah, and it's kind of what his observation was, and or an amalgamation of both. So I don't want to misquote him also. But one more thing, he also mentions it's he says that some teachings of the new age are of course, if they are contradictory, but some completely deny logic altogether, in the sense that he gives an example of some influential figures of that time, where he says that Sri Rajneesh puts it strongly. He says that it's not that the intellect sometimes misunderstands, rather the intellect always misunderstands. The intellect is the error. So he's trying to show that maybe there are some views that actually attack the whole intellect altogether. So that's kind of interesting that you have so many ideologies that would not even accept or allow the intellect to come in the discussion,
which is problematic, bro. Yeah. Absolutely, yeah. Because it's again, if the intellect can't get to any truth, well, then that statement itself is untrue, and that particular religion is by extension untrue. So it just doesn't make any sense, bro. It's a lot of nonsense, and so again, just juxtaposing that. So if you take what we're observing here, bro, with this new age, these trends or these aspects of it, which is that it's a lot of hodgepodge and irrational stuff that's mixed together, and then bring into play the jinn and the way they deceive, and the element of deception and confusion and false beliefs that they instill within society. Bring those two things together, bro. You have a recipe for disaster. You have a recipe for disaster, essentially. And that's yeah. So it just, they go hand in hand, bro. And you can see how people can completely destroy themselves by doing this.
Definitely. And this gives me a very important question that comes in. Sometimes you talk about something like UFO religion that emerged in the new age, and now maybe in the past, like 60 years ago, there was something like UFO religions, and now maybe they are again coming up. What is UFO religion? Is that?
Yeah, so there was a trend. Remember, so the whole UFO phenomenon begins in the late 40s, at least the popular modern or new UFO, like new atheism, new UFO phenomenon, or subculture. Yeah, begins, you say, in the late 40s with Kenneth Arnold's sightings that he had initially that he called flying saucers when he's flying over some mountain range in America. And then after that, you had the Roswell incident. I'm not saying that, I'm not talking about the truth of these events. I'm just giving you sort of a chronology of how it came about. And then the Roswell, and then a few other sort of crashes, UFO crashes. And this really got this whole idea of alien beings coming to Earth to help us or to save us into the zeitgeist, into the minds of people. And then in the 60s and 70s, you had the hippie movements, and many of them believed in space brothers. Some even, there were some offshoot cults like Heaven's
So
Gate.
space brothers, as in aliens, are called space brothers.
Yeah, they call them space
Oh,
brothers, right? Because
okay.
when
Oh, wow.
they'll smoke their weed, and everyone was their brother, even the ones that came out of space from space. But yeah, it was an interesting thing. So this was so you could see how these ideas, and then obviously with pop culture, you had Star Wars and Star Trek and all of these popular um TV serials and movies, which really created this notion of extraterrestrial beings coming to Earth, in many cases to help us and save us, in some cases to destroy us. Independence Day movie, all of this stuff. So we had this. This has been within the sort of collective consciousness of human beings since at least the late 40s. Now, what's very interesting about this type of idea is that it's again in line with the materialist mindset, the materialist psychology. Why? Because it's a belief in beings from other planets within this universe that are more technologically advanced than us, that are coming here to help us and save us. So it's almost like this savior figure, or this archetype of the savior coming to save us, which has been constructed or emerging from that sort of modern psychology, that modern secular materialist techno-secular sort of mindset. That's where it's emerging from. And it's also interesting because we know, if you look at it from the perspective of the jinn and the history of the jinn, they have taken on different forms throughout history, and they have taken on forms which were relevant to the people of the times. So in ancient times, they would appear as gods and demigods and all of this type of stuff, right? Now, I mean, if the jinn were to appear to modern human beings, the best form they could take on would be the form of extraterrestrials that were far more advanced than us. So look at the parallel here. These gods that were seen by ancient people were superior to the human beings. They came to help human beings and save them in many cases, and they had superpowers and all this type of stuff. Compare that to the modern conception of these technologically advanced alien beings who are superior to us. They have more technology than us. They're more powerful than us. And they're here to save us and take care of us. Very similar narratives in ways, but just a different guise, a different cloak, So, I mean, if the jinn were to take on any form to mislead modern human beings, this would be the best form. A technologically advanced species or beings that are coming here to help us, may have even seeded us on this planet. So yeah, there's a bit of this sort of trend in the 60s and 70s with and these cults that arose, like Heaven's Gate, etc. Which didn't have a good end, by the way. And now we're seeing that emergence again over the past, since 2017. The topics really picked up, and it never really went anywhere. There was always these subgroups and subcultures that were interested in this topic and spoke about it, but it was never mainstream because it was always seen as a fringe type of niche type of topic that people were into. But now with the congressional hearings in 2017, it's become very popular. It's become mainstream now. It's becoming mainstream now, and therefore it's given those guys that were previously seen as kooks and guys wearing tinfoil hats the room to maneuver within now and come forward and discuss this. And hence we're seeing the rise in popularity, because no longer are people going to be seen as crazy if they talk about this topic, or if they talk about their beliefs in these beings or their encounters with these beings. So more and more people are coming out and talking about this stuff. And again, bro, it highlights what we were discussing earlier, this internal need to have some sort of spiritual experience, non-material experience, an experience with a higher being, a higher power. But as long as it's not God, it could be anything else but God. So we're seeing that, we're seeing at least an element of this is that in motion, that type of idea in motion, where people expressing their desire to want to worship or submit to something higher, as long as it's not God, basically.
So this is very interesting. Maybe I'll make one comment and then I have a question for you, since we are short for time. So I'll just have something, the core part of the discussion, I think we still have to deal with one very important question. Before I do that, you specifically mentioned this whole UFO topic, which is emerging, UFO, UAP, NHI, no matter what we call it, that is emerging. I have seen another trend as well, especially in the UK and the US, which is also a rise in belief in the occult and, these kind of occult rituals, which is emerging in the youth, I think. And I saw firstly, like some people are talking about how in the UK, in the teenage people, they talk about witch talk and beacon identification, stuff like that, Ouija boards and stuff. All of that is becoming common. In the US, there was one study people bringing by springtide. We spoke about, which is kind of really shocking. We spoke about like how 40% of young people in America from the age of 13 to 29 use crystal or herbs monthly for spiritual or new age practices, at least once in a month. So this is kind of shocking that if the 40% of the teen of those sector within like those age group from 13 to 29 are in some way or the other involved in these practices, which means that there is a trend in occult type beliefs. There's a trend in UFO type beliefs, which clearly shows that there is a kind of move away from materialism. Now, since you are researching on this topic, and I think you are the best person to ask this, is what does this tell us? Like, is this bringing new opportunities for Dawah and new challenges for new Dawah? What are the new opportunities and what are the new challenges? That is the core.
That's that's a big question, man. So the challenges are that we are moving into an era now where we're dealing with ideologies, emerging ideologies, which are not clearly defined. This is a very important thing to understand. There is no clear border to these ideologies. There's no clear structure or framework to these ideologies. A lot of times it's a type of pick and mix, bag. Each bag is going to be different. Each person you speak to is going to be slightly different. So to realize that and to try and isolate common themes and trends, common beliefs or ideas which are prevalent across the board, regardless of how different the external aspects of these belief systems may be. And you will find similarities, right? You will find. So for example, we've highlighted a couple in this discussion today. One being that, that it's the individual that's creating these ideas in line with their desires and their beliefs and views. So that idea of that self-deification and that the human being knows best and what's right. So that's a fundamental tenet behind most of these ideologies, right? They're the product of the human mind. And therefore, that could be challenged. So going to the root of it and challenging it that way. But at the same time, realize that there will be these challenges where you will come across new ideologies which are very different. And the same belief system would have like maybe 50 different iterations of it, right? With slightly different varying beliefs and ideas. So it's going to be a lot of work trying to address people individually. However, if you can find common trends, that will really help. So really try to go to the heart of these ideologies and discover what's common. The second part of your question was what, bro? The opportunity?
So what are the new challenges that may come into Dawah to us, and what are the new opportunities that may come in both?
Yeah, so and therein lies the opportunity as well. But I think one of the biggest challenges we're dealing with right now in the Dawah is I don't think we're spending enough time really analyzing what's going on right now, right? We're stuck in a way where we think the same old is still applies, whereas people are moving forward. The challenge, these things are emerging, these new ideologies are coming about. No one's really paying attention for whatever reason, right? And there are many reasons behind this. It could be ignorance. It could be just not wanting to pay attention to this, not wanting to do the work. It could be that people just have specialized in certain areas, which is fine, and they are tackling those areas, right, which they need to, which is important. But we need to be like, okay, hold on a second. We're not in 2000 anymore. We're not in 1995 anymore. We're not in 2010 anymore. Dawkins is going to be gone soon. So are the horsemen of atheism. There are no new horsemen. The proteges of these people, the upcoming guys, that these people were trying to build and promote, are themselves moving away from what these guys were promoting. We're moving towards a new era. We need to really start paying attention to what's coming and ask those big questions, and really, try to prepare for what's to come, inshallah, as far as challenges are concerned. And I think the second thing we need to do is also find ways of helping Muslims understand Islam and reconnect with Islam within these times, considering the zeitgeist and what's going on currently. How do we present Islam to younger Muslims who are living in this age so that they can appreciate Islam for what it actually is? I think that's going to be another challenge as well, to really show the light of Islam and how it's significant and it's relevant in the times we live in, and it will continue to be relevant till the end times. And I think one of the ways, at least one of the ways, not the only way we can do this, is to highlight the absurdities of these ideologies and worldviews, and then show how Islam addresses those very absurdities and answers those very questions. I think that's something we need to do as well, inshallah. But yeah, those are just my thoughts in regards to this. But I think more, there needs to be some bravery in the dawah. What I mean by bravery is not being brave as far as, refuting or breaking down others. Yeah, it has to be intellectual bravery in the way that, take this UFO topic, for example, right? Not to blow our own trumpet, and I'm just highlighting this because I think there's a lesson in this, is, look, this whole topic, is a topic people would laugh at 5-6 years ago. You wouldn't ever think of anyone in the dawah touching upon or talking about this topic of UFOs and aliens and jinn and all of this type of stuff. But we have to, because it's becoming popular, right? So being brave to pick up on a topic which is relevant, and there's a niche and no one's touching it, and just going with it and doing the work on it. Not being concerned with what people are going to say or how other brothers are going to see you or treat you, or whatever the case is. Just being brave with it. And there'll be other such, I guarantee you, bro, there will be other such topics which are as crazy emerging in the next couple of years. AI is going to be a big one, bro. Right? It's going to be huge. And there's going to be crazy aspects of AI that need to be addressed. There's already crazy stuff going on in the AI world itself, which again is another topic in and of itself. AI girlfriends and relationships and all of this type of madness, man. It's mad. It's crazy, bro. And it's scary as well. And how that's going to affect not only non-Muslims, but Muslims as well. And there's going to be other stuff, bro. Stuff that we don't even know right now. We can't even think of, that's going to emerge in the next couple of years. Absurd, crazy stuff. So we're gonna have to be ready and be brave to be able to challenge these things and deal with these things and address these things, and and yeah,
inshallah. So one last point maybe that I want to talk about is like this, how I see it. So when it comes to us offering an Islamic worldview, I think there are many things that are unique to the Islamic worldview that are grounded in truth, and that is we can offer to these people who are accepting so many different beliefs, like an amalgamation of different belief systems. I think what the issue with those is, maybe those belief systems might have some kernels of truth, might have no kernels of truth, but the point is that they are extremely going towards something which, like, they can be in a sense, how to describe it, in terms of an extremist view about something. Whereas when it comes to the Islamic worldview, I think what the Islamic worldview offers is something that none of these spiritualities you see can offer, which is a balance between the unseen world, submission, power, ethics, which is grounded in truth, in a sense, where it is grounded in logic. It's a coherent worldview. You make sense of it, where you have God on the top, and we understand where authority comes from. Do we still believe in the unseen? But then we know what the limitations of the unseen is. How should we not interact with them and stuff like that? How should we deal with them? And where power comes from, where does accountability come from? This is like something which is unique to the Islamic worldview when it comes to chat from the newest spirituality and stuff like that. Do you have anything to say about that?
Yeah, absolutely, bro. I think that's a very important point, that Islam is a comprehensive worldview. It ties together the whole of reality in the most profound and complete way possible, without any loose ends. It answers all of those deep existential questions we have. It shows the link between our existence in this world and the hereafter. It's profound. And for example, in Christianity, Nietzsche challenged Christianity from this perspective, from the perspective of nihilism, and he said that, look, Christianity removes more meaning from life. Why? Because as a Christian, you believe you believe in Jesus. You're going to go to paradise. You're just waiting to die, essentially, in this world. So there's nothing to do in this world. You're just here you're waiting to die, essentially, right? So there's no meaning to life anymore. So he said that Christianity leads to more nihilism than godlessness or atheism.
Oh,
But from an Islamic
wow.
perspective, the same challenge doesn't hold, bro, because we know the relationship that Allah outlines between this world and the hereafter. Yes, our ultimate abode is the hereafter, and that's what we're aiming towards. But our existence in this world is extremely significant. We're not just waiting to die. This is, from an Islamic perspective, a springboard to the hereafter. This life is a springboard to the hereafter. What you do in this life, how you act, how you worship, what you don't do, all of this is a test, which, if you pass the test, results through the mercy of Allah, the hereafter, your paradise. So this life is not just you're waiting to die, it has a significant role as far as where you end up in the next world. So you can see how Islam, as a, again, comprehensive worldview, bridges the gap between the life of this world and the hereafter. This understanding also does away with what they refer to as the incoherency of life. You know, the sort of abrupt, absurd nature of life, as some of these atheists would say. You know, things are up and down, things go wrong, sometimes things don't work. How does that make sense? You know, on one level, reality is extremely ordered because there is, you know, the laws of the universe, the laws of physics, the laws of logic, mathematics. It's beautiful order within the universe. But on another level, there's chaos, there's war, there's bloodshed, there's this, there's that. How does this make sense? From an Islamic perspective, it falls into place. Allah created the universe as a sign. This universe has an objective, a purpose, it has a function, it's ordered, it has laws it's governed by. So things can function. But on the level, our human experience level, yes, there's trials and tribulations and chaos because life is a test. So it needs to act as a test. There has to be trials and tribulations and hardships and challenges and so on and so forth. So it all falls into place. Islam, I'm just giving a few examples, but Islam comprehensively addresses all aspects of reality, which no other worldview can do, bro. Any other worldview I've looked at up till date has not been able to address every single aspect of reality comprehensively. It may answer one aspect and it falls short on another, right? It may answer two or three, but then it falls short on a third. Islam is extremely comprehensive from this perspective, and that's why we need to present Islam as a comprehensive worldview, bro. Sorry, I know I've gone off on a tangent, but I don't remember what your original point was.
No, that was my question. No, my question was about the uniqueness of the Islamic worldview, and what can we show is something that Islam has to offer. So subhanallah, you actually gave a an answer which was completely on point and very relevant to the question. Alhamdulillah, I think that was the final note that maybe can tie those things up, because in the end, the whole purpose of this discussion is actually to actually, in the sense, like, update people about new challenges that might come in, but then also new opportunities that might come in and how we should deal with them. And I think I really enjoyed the conversation. I'm just one thing that I wanted to touch upon, which we of course did not have much time, is also something that you research on, which is on the topic of jinn and stuff like that. Maybe inshallah in future, if we get any opportunity, we might bring that topic up, and maybe the topic of occult and science and how they are connected, because I think that's an avenue or which many people don't know, and tying those things up can open new, like, can actually update people about what has happened and what happens in the world, which makes
absolutely, bro. Yeah,
completely unaware about.
That's another interesting piece of the puzzle. So it's not disconnected. You're absolutely right. Like a lot of what we've discussed today, there is another element to all of this, which is the occult and the dark metaphysical forces which are at play, have always been at play when it comes to, throughout our human history. And that's a very interesting angle. And especially considering, going back to the parable of Nietzsche, where, the earth being unshackled from its sun, and people, after killing God or turning away from God, losing their bearings and not knowing what direction they're going in, and trying to play God themselves, act as surrogates, for God, and the confusion that ensues from this. And as the years go by and times go by, we're heading more towards an age of more confusion and distortion and just madness. We're literally heading towards an absolutely crazy age. And in such a time, even for Muslims, we need to ground ourselves more so in our tradition and understand Islam comprehensively, so that we could be grounded, bro, when these storms are, while these storms are blowing. We need to be grounded. And that's a plug for the upcoming book as well, bro, inshallah, which will be out hopefully by the end of this year, which addresses a lot of what we discussed, and also presents Islam as a comprehensive worldview. that will help ground people, regardless of the ideologies that are out there today and that may emerge even in the next 50, 60, 100 years, because they will all have the same thing in common. They are godless ideologies. They are not from the divine, and they are a human effort, or human plus jinn effort, whatever the case may be. So we need to be ready for this stuff, inshallah.
This was brilliant. So just one question, and maybe you can answer in just yes and no, and we can end the discussion. Is we spoke about how atheism was a challenge, but now atheism is dead. Since in some sense it is dead, or at least it's at the verge of dying. This new challenge that comes in with new spirituality and this new belief, do you think this can be more dangerous than atheism? Yes or no?
I think it's going to be more dangerous. I think that the dangers are higher because of again, our psychological conditioning of wanting to be in charge and control, and all of the way our minds have been conditioned, even as for Muslims. Because remember, everything we see, bro, it's all about progress. It's all about achieving and doing as much as you can. There's a brilliant book by Byung Chul Han, I think that's how you say his name. It's called Burnout Society. I really recommend everyone read that book. One of the things he outlines is that what's happened with modernity is that we've moved away from an age of obedience towards an age of achievement, where you're constantly being bombarded by this idea that you have to, like we said, create your reality, achieve, do. You are the master of your reality and your universe. And that has also affected Muslims, that type of mindset. We also have that mindset to some degree. And when you look at these new ideologies that are emerging, they are egocentric ideologies, bro. They are, self-centered ideologies. And that is appealing, that you create your own flavor, your own style, your own version. And I think that in many regards is more dangerous than that sort of old school, structured, baseless atheism. So we have to definitely be careful. But at the end of the day, bro, if you're grounded within Islam, inshallah, and make dua to Allah and Allah guides you, none of this is going to affect you, inshallah.
Inshallah ta'ala. And with that note, maybe we can end this discussion with the hope that we will have you back on this platform. We would love to see you back. And then there are so many interesting things that, like many of the books that you recommend, maybe we can actually talk about them as well. You actually had recommended me one book, Demonic Reality. I think maybe in the next discussion, I want to bring that up and, talk about, because I found something really fascinating in that as well. And I hope to see you. And I hope to see you back on this platform. Any closing statements that you have?
No, Jazakallah khair, bro. May Allah bless you. You're doing amazing work, bro. Like getting Muslims to think and, bringing on different academics and specialists from different fields is brilliant, bro. It's focused work that needs to be done. And I think people should take example from you and realize that, yes, we are in the age of social media and the algorithm is promoting you to do certain types of videos and content that will get you the views. But to keep yourself balanced and grounded and ask yourself, I'm not into, or tell yourself, I'm not interested in what the algorithm wants. I'm interested in what Allah wants and how I can benefit the dawah, and being sincere with yourself and doing that work regardless of what views you get or how the algorithm pushes it is how people should be thinking today. It shouldn't be the case that you just want to build a platform for the sake of building a platform and therefore, sacrifice yourself to this digital idol, which is the algorithm. Essentially, that's what people are doing, right? The algorithm tells you, this is what I want. You take the content that it wants to its altar and you sacrifice it, and then it rewards you with views and followers. Don't fall into this trap, brothers and sisters.
It's a form of submission.
Absolutely. Do meaningful work. It's just another idol. It's a digital idol. That's what it is. The mediums change. The issue is the same. Just do this work. So may Allah bless you, bro. You're leading by example, and we need more brothers like you, inshallah, that do this amazing work, inshallah.
May Allah actually give us ikhlas and actually accept the efforts. So anyone how can they follow you, and do you have a channel of your own, and what work do you talk about, speak about on your channel, and also what IREP is? Can you just, before we end, I think this is important for people to give them an avenue if they want to know more about you and your work and follow you.
Yeah, so some of my stuff is on my YouTube channel. It's called Epistemics. Epistemics Imran Hussein. If you search that, my name is with E, spelled with A there. So if you search it with the E, you'll find it. And I have some videos. I don't post regularly. Whenever I have something to discuss or mention, I'll do videos. I'm trying to do more regular lives, Q&As with people, inshallah. So that's one place. Some of my other stuff could be found on Sapiens Institute, is the organization I work for, where you'll find my courses and my books, or my current book, Dying to Believe, and other stuff I've done there online, inshallah, with Sapiens. And IREP basically is a new initiative that a group of us are working on, inshallah, which is basically IREP stands for Islamic Research into Exotic Phenomena, mashallah, headed by our beloved brother Farouk McDermott, mashallah, who's been on your channel once and is going to be on it again.
Yeah,
And
it's been twice, thrice, I think.
mashallah, mashallah. And Khalid obviously is a part of that effort with some other brothers, Afaq and Tariq and Isa. May Allah bless them all, inshallah. And the objective of it is, as the title suggests, our research into exotic phenomenon. Currently, we're focusing on the whole UFO Jinn topic. In the future, we may touch upon other stuff. I think we will be touching upon other stuff, considering the direction the New Age is going towards and the rise in occultism. So it'll be an interesting endeavor, inshallah. But yes, a small group. We have a website, irep.world. We have our Twitter page, irep. Definitely check that out. We do spaces every Friday on that, inshallah. And we have a YouTube channel, IREP as well, IREP, where we do podcasts and we'll be doing lives on that as well, inshallah. So definitely check that out too.
Jazakallah khairan. And take care. Inshallah, we'll hope to see you soon. Assalamu
You too, brother.
alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.